get us motivated for some investment finance today.
Where did you find this?
At the conference I went to, I found an economist. I've met him before, but we started talking about the audio, which hadn't been on there, and they had just recently put up a bunch of econ-related music where there's themes in the music that are economics topics. It's on critical comments, so it's free space. So. All right. So, today, oh, you know what? I wanted to do something first a little bit different. I wanted to go back to chapter 1 and look at maybe chapter 2.
Should I do it this time?
Should I bring my text? Yeah. There we go, this one. Okay, so this chapter looks at behavior, and we're going to talk about some important economic principles of adverse selection and moral hazard that we've seen in maybe some other classes too, and look specifically at how they pertain to finance. So as you work through this chapter, it's important to keep in mind the structure of finance in kind of these direct and indirect ways. So banks sit up here when they take money from others and then lend it out to other people. That's serving that intermediary role. And so that's known as indirect finance. We can also go straight to the market system and buy those corporate bonds, stocks, right? And so that is a direct way of funding or financing the activities that go on. And so these guys come down directly into the markets, and we kind of look at both of those areas. And so, any questions on this picture before we go? It's kind of review from before, but this is chapter 2, I guess. I thought it was chapter 1, but setting up this. Okay. So our opening shot here, chapter 8, starts to break down what the real world looks like in terms of funding. And they cover it over these 4 countries. And we've got loans, indirect finance, bonds and stocks, direct finance. And so what do you notice between the division of the securities markets, equity financing, debt financing, right, through corporate bonds? What do we notice about the division for the United States?
Mostly debt finance.
We do mostly debt financing and indirect or direct debt financing. What are non-banks? Who's in that group? We got banks and non-banks. They are corporate in nature, but
They make capital groups probably, right?
yeah, a bit like.
Venture capitalists.
No, not so much the venture. I mean, the venture capitalists do that, but usually venture capital, they're taking a lot of times an equity position. It can be a loan, but a lot of and that's a lot smaller segment of the market. But there's these big groups that have lots of money. You guys pay premiums to them all the time. What do you pay a premium to? All of you guys probably, likely all have insurance companies, right? So insurance companies, those aren't banks. They're not chartered banks. But they are institutions that end up doing loans. Pension funds, all kinds of big institutional type lenders. And so the bottom line is those are all in the indirect finance mode. They are collecting premiums from insurance holders and then doing something with them. So they're providing that indirect role of funding. And so if we take the 18% plus 38%, what does that give us? 56%. 56% of the funding for activities are of this form. the indirect form. And what's interesting about the other countries? We've got Germany and Japan.
I'm not as big into insurance.
Okay, yeah, less developed insurance areas, and the United States is kind of an insurance hub for the world for a lot of insurance products. So that kind of makes sense. But in aggregate, we see kind of the same picture. If we take this, I mean, this is a little heavier, of course, 86% versus the 7 and 8. So we still kind of see a similar picture around the globe of how funds are transferred to people. All right, so we're going to look in this chapter in part of why that's the case. And the textbook, I'm not going to be doing PowerPoints the whole time here, but I'm going to do the first couple. So the book covers 8 kind of stylized facts that we observe. So again, empirically in the real world, what do we see is going on? And so we need to kind of try to figure out, well, why does the world work this way? Could it be done better? Of course, is always a question economists might be asking. Is there a better way of setting things up? So stocks are not the most important sources of external financing for business. We saw that in the last picture. Issuing marketable debt and securities is not the primary way in which businesses finance their operations. Again, the last slide showed that. Indirect finance is many times more important than direct finance. Kind of all of this is pulling off of what we just looked at. Financial intermediaries, particular banks, are the most important source of external funds used to finance business. So throughout this chapter, we're going to explore why we see those. Any questions on 1 through 4? I got 4 more coming up. It's just to kind of motivate the discussion of the topics. The financial system is among the most heavily regulated sectors of the economy. So government is involved in a big way. Well-established corporations have the easy access. Why don't the little ones? Collateral is prevalent. Feature of debt contracts. What's collateral again?
Something that they hold to make sure you...
Okay, so something that the bank, now does the bank hold it?
Or like that you have, that they get if you don't...
They have a claim to, yeah. So that's important to say. You still get to hold on to the asset, but if you default, they can get the asset. So you've given up one of your bundles of rights with assets. You still have the right of use as long as you're good on your contract. They can't just come in and seize it for the heck of it. It's all laid out in the debt contract that if you default, it might even get down to the nitty-gritty of we're going to give you a 30-day notice, and if you don't pay us, then we're going to give you a 15-day notice, and then on the 45th day, we're going to come and seize the asset, right? So we can get into detailed things, and that's where number 8 comes in. Debt contracts are extremely complicated legal documents. And they tend to put restrictions on borrowers. Okay, so all of those stylized facts are things we're going to think about as we look at adverse selection and moral hazard. Those are kind of the 2 primary things that we're going to focus on. All right, any last comments or questions on 8 things? So, what does adverse selection and moral hazard? So, adverse selection. Let me just do AS just because we'll probably write it a few times here. Adverse selection. Does anybody remember that one from some other place? I think we even talked about it in Money Banking probably at some point in other chapters, but really the focus of this chapter is taking a deep dive on it. Adverse selection.
Did we talk about it?
Probably. Yeah, we definitely did. Yeah. we talked about it in probably quite a few classes. So this is one of those things that you'll start to see as an econ major. I'd like you to have the concept of it off the top of your head, because it's one of those things. Oh, that's adverse selection. You know, like you'll start to see it out in the real world when it happens.
Isn't it where you have an inclination to certain things over another for whatever fiscal or personal monetary reason?
It's not one of those biases. I think you're
Yeah.
close, but it's on who we select and who comes to us in terms of maybe it's a customer, maybe it's in an insurance scheme. It's who comes to the table and says, "I want insurance." You know, so do risky drivers tend to come to the insurance company and say, "Hey, I'd like to have a full insurance policy. Littlest deductible possible, please. $50 deductible would be great." You know, the insurance company might attract, given their terms, risky people. What they'd like to get is an average of people, really safe people and really risky people, but through the process they might be adversely selecting people that come to the pool. They're not a general draw from the population, but they're unintentionally getting risky people, which might cause their insurance company to go under, right, if they have too many claims going on. So that's not the purpose of the policy. Okay, so adverse selection is, let me give you a all online. Well, maybe I will give you, I mean, there's one thing that I'm going to say later, but I wasn't planning on doing it now. So, a problem that occurs due to asymmetric information before a transaction occurs. I want to say before, I want to be a little more specific with that last word. Before a transaction is agreed upon. I was wrong. Your book did give me a nice little reference. It's close. I mean, I like this a little bit better. So I kind of threw another word in here that we're going to look at in this chapter: asymmetric information. What's going on there?
Inside of the transaction, one party has more information than the other.
Good. So just not fair information on one side of the coin. I think we mentioned that one earlier before too. So the key, go ahead.
Say generally, where you have a car or whatever that has problems but you can't detect it, so you try to sell it off.
That's right. Yep. So the book goes through the lemons problem, which is part of it. So that's kind of the classic case of adverse selection, is that we don't know what we're getting when we buy that used car. I think mine's turned out to be kind of a lemon, given the amount of money I've had to dump into it. When I thought I was getting a good deal, and I was pretty happy at the price I got on my car, it felt like it was $1,000 or $2,000 under market value, and I kind of feel like I got good. There was a couple of issues along the way, and then I dumped another 3 into it. So all of a sudden I'm like, I finally gave in. The first couple things that were wrong with it, I knew they were wrong when I got it, and I shelled out some money. So I knew I was going to put some money into it.
You're talking about your Jag?
Yeah. The second one, remember the first one had the tree fall on it. I'm actually driving a different one than I had before. Most people don't know that because it looks the same.
Yeah, because you had 2 of the exact same ones.
Yeah, I had 2 for a while because I dumped the other one. So long story short, I took the insurance proceeds and I was able to get a car that had, my old one had 175,000, this one had 75,000. So I shaved 100,000 miles off the motor. And then I kept the same rims and I did little Mickey Mouse stuff. But hopefully, knock on particle board or something that looks closer to wood, it's running pretty well now, but you just don't know. So back to where that fits in with adverse selection is the seller had more information than me ahead of time. And so I don't know if I'm selecting from a number of different cars, which one might have some hidden defects to it. And so then you have to kind of adjust your behavior accordingly based on the concept of adverse selection. All right, our other concept is moral hazard. Moral hazard. Okay, and this is a problem that arises to asymmetric information. Asymmetric information and or behavior after the transaction is agreed to. So, does anybody want to give me an example of moral hazard? You can stick with the insurance, driving, car concept if you want.
Go off of that, basically, because you have insurance, you drive over everything.
Okay, so we're a little more careless. Our behavior has changed due to us being under contract now. It's like, phew, now I can drive crazy. I can hammer it because if I smash up, it's going to be covered. So that is the moral hazard part of it.
Russ?
Yeah.
So did you purposely park underneath that tree?
No, but I will tell. This is being recorded. I better be careful.
We can press pause for
No, no kidding. A week before it happened, I think I kind of wanted to get down the road a paint job or something because the front with 175,000 miles, just the normal rock chips and stuff that come up and hit your car or whatever. And I told my neighbor because we were looking at the trees. There are limbs that have fallen, but I did tell my neighbor there's a small part of me that just would like one of those branches to come and hit my car. And a week later after I said that, it was a little bit spooky. Now this is not a limb, but literally a thing. I've got a picture I can show you guys later, but we're talking 18 inches in diameter. It came down and impaled my hood, so it was far from just a little scratch. So that's why it ended up being such a large damages. So, so to answer your question, I did not park my car in any different spot than I have been parking the whole time I've lived there. So no, I did not follow. I did not do that. Okay, see, now it's on video.
So no insurance fraud has occurred.
No insurance fraud has occurred whatsoever. I was parking in the same spot I did ever since I moved to Ottawa. So that is clear. My conscience is clear. But you are correct. Had hypothetically I started parking my car under a tree that I never parked before and kind of hoped during the big windstorm, that would be an example of moral hazard. Not an example of what I did, but that would be an example of moral hazard.
So when was this
Okay.
storm? That same day?
Well, it was later, yeah, it was a week later. I think we had like 60-mile-an-hour winds or something. It was one of those type events.
The insurance company by the end of class.
All right, so between these two things, sometimes the lines get blurred a little bit. Look at these two definitions. What's the key thing that separates them? before and after. That's right. So you can kind of think in a timeline sense, I think is helpful, is to, if we kind of have a timeline moving forward of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go time period 0. I'm not setting up a present value formula for once here doing this, but and we look at this day being the contract date. This is the day we signed the insurance deal. This is the day we had the employer-employee contract stated where I got my new raise, right? A new commission structure was put into place. This is the day I signed the mortgage for my house with a 30-year fixed, right? This is the day. So that's it. And then we think about the rest of this moving forward. Moral hazard happens in this area. So moral hazard is on this breaking point of how does behavior change. We can look at your behavior prior to the contract, i.e. where did I park my car, so that we know for sure that there was not any moral hazard going on with Russ McCullough's Jag, because we know he was parking his car in the same spot prior, therefore we know that it was not moral hazard, right? So we can look at behavior before contract, behavior after contract. If there's a behavior modification, that's what economists call moral hazard. The adverse selection kicks in over here. We've got two voluntary parties getting together, making a deal at a certain time. Who's going to come to the table, right? Who's going to come to the table prior to that contract date? And so they are distinct things. There's not, if I'm drawing a Venn diagram, they don't overlap. It's very distinct moral hazard here.
Because you have the asymmetric information knowing that you park under a tree, which is then not necessarily, and because you park under a tree, the chance of having a slighter desire to go.
No, you are absolutely right there. So the insurance company might have had, there was some asymmetric information. Did they come out and check all my trees to see if any of them needed to be cut down? To see if any of them had a few loose branches? You know, even though I was parking, I didn't do moral hazard. There might have been a little bit of adverse selection there, that I was a riskier prospect than what it looked like compared to where I lived before. Even if I had a good track record, I was in a little bit riskier position. Now, insurance companies know that over time, and so they start to kind of average that out and build that into their premiums. But you're absolutely right. They didn't know prior to it that that might have been an issue. Okay.
I like hidden information versus hidden action.
Good, yeah, yep. Hidden information versus hidden action. Well, and the action isn't even necessarily too hidden here. It might not have been known about here because it's the change in behavior. So definitely hidden information on asymmetric adverse selection. Yes. Okay, any other comments? Okay, so how does this stuff tie into this chapter, or into this class, I guess, in terms of securities and loans is the next step we want to take and think about. As it relates to a company, maybe a big corporation of some sort, how does this, give me some examples of how this could be an issue if we're looking at a big corporation.
It's more like a merger and acquisition, a company buying out another company that has a lot of assets, holding the asset holdings of that's like that. Say no, and then there's a relation holding assets.
Right.
So the other companies.
They might not bring up every little detail when they're trying to make a deal ahead of time. Good. So merger and acquisition situation could be one. There's actually lots of them. So any other ones come to mind? All the workings of a firm.
We're talking about how, what situations might be.
Yeah. Yep. either adverse selection or moral hazard in the workings of a company. And we just looked and saw that big companies take on debt financing as well as equity financing. And do those two things tend to work differently with these two concepts?
I mean, what's coming to mind is more so being on this side of providing the financing. I mean, we look at what happened back in 2007, 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more, you have the adverse selection of bringing in the people that are attracted to the lower rates because they can do it now and stuff like that. And it's like, well, we do this, we can make money, so what a big deal.
And there might have been some other asymmetric information related to like principal agent problem that we're not going to talk about today, but we'll talk about later of getting those people, right? The incentives were such that it was whoever you could drum up if you were a loan officer, if they had a heartbeat, they would qualify for the loan, right? And they got their commission up front. So some of that can be some asymmetric information issues as well.
Adverse selection and moral hazard, where companies were advising selling these securities, and at the same time they were trying to dump their holdings out as fast as possible because they could see the markets.
Right. Okay, so I got a 14-minute video. And what I want, your assignment is to write down at least one question, to write it down, and I'll have you turn this in to me. But we're going to have a discussion after the video. So once the video concludes, we'll have a discussion. And just things that come up as you watch the video. It's about Tyco, and Tyco is mentioned in this chapter. Tyco is a toy manufacturer. And this is kind of a famous case where the CEO ran some problems, and this is from CBS News where he's doing an interview from jail. So, what'd you say, Mike?
Is that the one that the guy was talking about? The
Yes.
small
Well, one of them
investing
in this chapter. Yeah.
Kozlowski was thick with tales of corporate scandal, lost pension funds, big-time theft, and even bigger-time prison sentences for the Enron gang. Then there was Dennis Kozlowski, CEO of Tyco, who was found guilty of, in effect, using Tyco's immense financial resources for what the prosecution described as his own personal piggy bank. You might remember the $6,000 shower curtain and stealing over $100 million from the company. But we wondered how the man who could whistle up a corporate jet on a whim or throw a $2 million birthday party was doing in his reduced circumstances. What's it like to go from king of the world to prisoner number 05A4820, serving 8 to 25 years behind bars? We caught up with Dennis Kozlowski at Mid-Safe Correctional Facility in upstate New York.
Okay.
Guests include murderers, drug dealers, and pedophiles, and the odd multi-millionaire.
In my wildest imagination, when I would project myself into my late 50s and early 60s, where I would be or what I would be doing, if I make a list of 100 different places or 100 different things, here would never make that list.
He now earns $1 a day, mopping floors and slinging hash to his fellow inmates. In January, Kozlowski spent a week in hospital with a heart ailment and got to thinking.
You've not talked publicly up till now. Why did you decide to do it?
When I was in the hospital in January, I was outside the emergency room feeling really uncomfortable and frightened. And that's when I really made the firm decision that I wanted to go through and talk to you at this time.
You became aware of your own mortality,
Very much so.
and you didn't want to leave this world
Without at least an opportunity to talk about my side of the story to the extent that I can talk about it.
He agreed to speak with one stipulation, that we would not include anyone else in this story. Because of an appeal, he'll not discuss the details of his case, but he will say,
I believe in the judicial system. I think all that works. But in this case, the jury got it wrong.
that jury convicted him of 22 counts of grand larceny, conspiracy, and securities fraud. His trials occurred in the wake of a white-collar crime wave, Enron, WorldCom, and Martha Stewart. The news hound smells rotten. accused of looting his company of hundreds of millions of dollars and living the life of a pasha at stockholders' expense. He was the living, breathing version of Wall Street's Gordon Gekko.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Up to a point. What's puzzling is why does a man who struggled so hard, so effectively to make it, become so careless, or stupid, or arrogant? Born in a tenement on the wrong side of the tracks in Newark, New Jersey, Kozlowski worked his way through school.
I played guitar in a band, I worked in a pharmacy, I worked in a car wash, and I had 2 or 3 jobs going at any given time.
Where you came from, there weren't that many options.
No, growing up in York, New Jersey at the time, you never thought of yourself growing up to become CEO.
He started at Tyco, then a small New Hampshire manufacturing company, as an accountant making $28,000 a year, and worked his way up to CEO. He became known as deal-a-day Dennis, constantly acquiring new companies, and building Tyco from a $40 million company into a $40 billion conglomerate.
Would like to become, all things equal, a $100 billion company.
Wall Street could not get enough of the young, aggressive CEO. He also began making staggering amounts of money, among the top-earning CEOs in the country.
We had a pay-for-performance culture at Tyco, so most of the money I earned was in appreciation of Tyco stock.
1 year you made, I think, $170 million.
Not sure 170, I made over 100 million. Yeah.
Well,
It's more money than
10 million here, 10
Exactly.
million there, who cares? What's it like to earn that kind of money?
It's a way of keeping score, I guess.
Keeping score meant keeping up with the masters of the universe. $30 million to build a mansion in Boca Raton, acquiring homes in Nantucket and Colorado, and just loose change $16 million for Endeavor, a vintage yacht. Wealth meant one thing, social acceptance another. He and his second wife, Karen Mayo, spent millions on painting. He joined the board of the Whitney Museum. For a kid at Terra, New York, he had Tyco buy a $19 million apartment and decorated it with $11 million worth of stuff. The poor kid from Newark was stepping out on Fifth Avenue.
Would Dennis Kozlowski a few years ago even contemplate going to Europe to buy old master paintings?
No, absolutely not. It came with earning the amount of money I was earning at the time.
And do you really care about the painting, or was it again kind of keeping score?
It was probably, keeping score. I really, I had no business, going out and buying paintings like that.
Was it your idea, or were you invited to join the board of the Whitney?
Oh, I was not my idea at all. I was invited to join the board, and I never made a board meeting.
So you were invited because they like having really rich guys on board.
I assume it wasn't for my knowledge of art.
But it was art that would lead to his undoing. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office was investigating galleries that were helping customers avoid sales taxes. Kozlowski had purchased $13 million worth of paintings, including a Renoir and Monet, for the Tyco apartment. But prosecutors said he had some of them shipped to Tyco's offices in New Hampshire, a state without sales tax. They were then trucked back to New York. In 2002, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office indicted Kozlowski for evading over $1 million in sales tax, and he resigned as CEO. But that was only the beginning. The Tyco board investigated his CEO's behavior and made public a report that was devastating. Kozlowski's excesses were revealed in excruciating detail. Decorations for the New York apartment became classic tabloid headlines, mocking the CEO's taste and his greed. The $15,000 doggy umbrella stand, and the ultimate symbol of his downfall, that $6,000 shower curtain.
The coverage was really punishing.
Sounds horrible.
As overblown as the coverage may have been, you signed off on it.
I signed off on a decorator to decorate the Tyco apartment, and beyond that was my involvement. The first time I heard about that shower curtain, the first time, I read about it in the newspaper. It was calling around asking, where's the shower curtain? But to this day, I wouldn't know if it fell on me. So.
And then there was the 40th birthday party for Kozlowski's wife Karen in Sardinia. It was togas galore, a 4-day festival of flesh.
What's wrong?
Jimmy Buffett was flown in for the music, and guests were treated to a special cake, an anatomically correct woman with exploding breasts. The cost was over $2 million. Since Kozlowski claimed it was in part a work retreat, Tyco footed half the bill.
Was it embarrassing for you? It's like that tape.
Oh, it was
This kind of
horrible.
orgy going on.
Horrible. It was over the top. I was taken aback by it, but I smiled and worked my way through it. Won the night in as fast as I could.
Donald Trump called your behavior tacky.
Tacky. Tacky from Donald Trump.
From Donald Trump.
Well, here we go.
Those excesses may have been tacky, but tacky doesn't send you to jail. Far more serious was the allegation that Kozlowski literally stole money from Tyco. He and his second-in-command, Mark Schwartz, were charged with stealing $170 million and pocketing an additional $430 million through the sale of company stock, while lying about Tyco's financial condition. The prosecution accused Kozlowski of granting himself unauthorized bonuses and running hundreds of millions of dollars worth of personal expenses through interest-free Tyco loan programs. No expense was too great or too small to run through Tyco. None of this, claims the prosecution, was authorized by the Tyco board, and the jury agreed. Guilty. But he's still fighting.
I am absolutely not guilty of the charges that were brought upon me. There was no criminal intent here. Nothing was hidden. There were no shredded documents. Nobody was told not to say anything. All the information the prosecutors got was directly off the books and records of the company.
In the trial, Kozlowski took the stand and testified that everything he did was authorized. He'd already repaid many of the loans and claimed he was simply an overworked executive who left the details for underlings to handle.
I was a delegator, and I did focus on the bigger picture.
You were at the top of the world, hugely successful, hugely admired for your business acumen. How you could be so careless?
I was pushing the company and growing the company and pushing all aspects of it to continue to grow. I just don't think we put enough infrastructure in place to support some of that growth.
Yeah, but some of the lines got blurred. Some of the lines between what was your money, what was Tyco's money, became very fuzzy.
I think I did everything accordingly to the way the programs were outlined and the way it was done by my predecessors.
Was there a situation where the rules got lost?
More, as I said, we're in appeal on this, and there's also civil litigation, so at this point in time, I think we're crossing the line.
The Tyco board had given Kozlowski virtual carte blanche, and the one person Kozlowski said could clear it all up, the head of compensation, was Dick. Whatever Kozlowski did, it was clear that the Tyco board was not exactly meticulous in carrying out its oversight. Even so, Kozlowski believes he was a dead duck from the start.
I was a guy sitting in courtroom who made $100 million a year, and I think the juror sitting there just would have to say, all that money, he must have done something wrong. I think it's just, it's as simple as that.
Kozlowski says he was done in by bad timing, the Enron and WorldCom catastrophes. He feels that most people believe that's what happened to Tyco, that employees were left high and dry. But Tyco remains a thriving $60 billion company.
The company went on after I left there. The company is alive today, it's doing well.
Does it make you angry to be lumped in with guys like Bernie Eccles and Kenway?
That just frustrated me to no end. These are companies that had financial and accounting schemes that had major scams. That wasn't Tyco. This was a major paid dispute.
But the jury didn't see it that way. He was sentenced to 8 to 25 years and ordered to pay restitution and fines of almost $200 million. It's unclear if he'll have any money left when he's released. In the meantime, he spends much of his time in prison focused on his appeal. He can receive visitors on the weekends, but he says he has few friends left.
In the final analysis, most of the people were close to you because of the power and the wealth.
That's right. And they wanted to share in that. That was probably 90% of the people in my life.
And they didn't give a damn about Dennis Kozlowski, the man.
That's a hard thing to reconcile yourself to, but it did happen.
And it was not just his friends who left him.
How about Karen?
Well, we're divorcing, and that's we're moving on. So
But was his marriage, like so many things in his life, all about money?
we're in the middle of divorce and agreement. I'm not going to say anything about that, at this time.
He says he tries to stay positive. He's 60 years old now, and the harsh reality of his predicament is inescapable.
When you're sleeping in jail, you wake up all the time because there's a light on all night. So you kind of wake up every hour wishing and praying and hoping it's just a dream. But it's not, it's reality, it's where you're at.
Oftentimes, you guys get religion inside. Does that happen with you?
There's a spiritual side that, I think about and reflect on from time to time. But that's personal and private and everything.
And you've got the time to do it.
I have plenty of time. Yes, that I have.
It's mean how he rubbed that in